You're about to discover 3 powerful psychological secrets that latch you into her mind, making your presence constant even when you're not there. 1. Emotional anchoring. Emotional anchoring is one of the most powerful psychological tools you can use to stay in a woman's mind long after you've left the room. It doesn't rely on dramatic gestures or flashy words. Instead, it works through subtle yet unforgettable emotional experiences that connect with her on a deeper, almost unconscious level. Think about the moments in life that stick with us forever. Those aren't usually the loudest or most obvious. They're the quiet ones. The way someone looked at you when they meant what they said. The warmth of a genuine laugh. The feeling of being completely present in a conversation. Emotional anchoring works the same way. When you create moments that tap into her senses and her emotions at the same time, you're planting a mental trigger that keeps firing long after you're gone. Imagine you're on a date, and in the middle of your conversation, you say something that makes her feel truly seen. Something like, "You always notice the smallest things. That's rare." Now, you're not just complimenting her, you're recognizing something that most people overlook. And because no one else has said that to her before in that way, it lodges itself in her mind. Now, every time someone overlooks her details, she remembers that moment. Every time someone compliments her and it feels generic, your words stand out even more. Emotional anchoring isn't about flattery, it's about resonance. You're giving her a feeling that connects to her identity, and that's what makes it impossible to forget. This can go beyond words. A certain song playing in the background, the scent of your cologne, the way you hold her gaze just 1 second longer than usual. These small but intentional sensory elements become attached to the emotional tone of your time together. So, when she hears that song again, or when someone walks by wearing a similar scent, it reactivates the emotional imprint. You're not just a memory, you're an emotion. That's the secret. People don't remember what you said as much as they remember how you made them feel. So when you make her feel something powerful, excitement, safety, mystery, warmth, you begin to occupy a permanent space in her emotional memory. And the beauty of emotional anchoring is that it doesn't require you to be constantly present. In fact, it works better when you're not. Because when she's alone, scrolling through her phone, sipping coffee, or sitting in silence, something, anything, can trigger the thought of you. Not because you texted, not because you posted something, but because you left behind emotional fingerprints that she's still carrying. That scent, that inside joke, that specific look in your eyes. These aren't random. They're deliberate emotional cues that turn you from the guy she met into the man she keeps thinking about. If done right, emotional anchoring works like a mental echo. She can't unhear what you said. She can't unfeel how she felt. And because of that, even when you're not there physically, you're still present mentally and emotionally. That's the kind of presence that keeps you unforgettable. Not through noise or effort, but through emotional depth and precision. 2. Unpredictable presence. Predictability is comforting at first, but comfort rarely creates desire. In the world of human attraction, familiarity can quickly become forgettable. The moment someone becomes predictable, they blend into the background of her thoughts. But the moment you introduce subtle unpredictability, you become impossible to ignore. A man who can balance presence and mystery, warmth and distance, is a man who holds power, not by force, but by curiosity. When she doesn't always know what's coming next from you, her mind begins to engage. She pays closer attention. She replays past interactions. She imagines what you're thinking. That's where true attraction starts. Not in certainty, but in anticipation. To create this unpredictable presence, you don't need to vanish or play games. It's about small, intentional shifts that keep her wondering. One day you respond with thoughtful energy, the next day you respond briefly and disappear again. You send a message at an unexpected time. You say something that makes her pause and think deeply about who you really are. You drop a small compliment. Not too much, not too often, but just enough to spark something inside her. Then you go quiet again. Not out of indifference, but out of discipline. You're not flooding her with presence. You're letting her crave it. That craving is what makes her mind return to you again and again. Think about it. We're most drawn to what feels rare. Not rare in availability, but rare in emotional experience. If you always say good morning, if you always reply instantly, if your routines are the same every single day, eventually she'll predict what comes next. And when she can predict you, she stops thinking about you. But if some mornings you say nothing, and then another morning you say something that touches her soul. She starts to lean forward. She pays attention. You're no longer just another name in her phone. You're a mystery she wants to understand. That's not manipulation. That's mastery. You're controlling your presence with intention, not desperation. Unpredictability works not by creating chaos, but by creating rhythm that's just out of sync with expectation. She texts you, and instead of replying instantly, you wait. You reply hours later, but with something that's thoughtful, calm, composed. Now, your timing has meaning. She begins to associate your silence with emotional impact. When you do reappear, it feels significant. She begins to anticipate. Not when you'll reach out, but how. And that anticipation becomes emotional energy. Her thoughts start to orbit around you without her even realizing it. You've entered the most powerful space of all, the space between her thoughts and her emotions. You don't need to be dramatic to be unforgettable. Just unpredictable enough that she has to wonder. Just distant enough that she has to notice your absence. Just rare enough that when you're present, it feels special. And in that balance, you rise above every other man who's too available, too eager, too easy to read. You become a question in her mind she genuinely wants answered. That's how you stay present, by not always being present. That's how you become unforgettable, by being just out of reach, but never out of mind. 3. Strategic disappearance. There is something uniquely powerful about stepping back, not to withdraw, not to punish, but to magnify your presence by removing it. Strategic disappearance isn't about ghosting or manipulation. It's about allowing space for emotional gravity to build. When you are always present, always replying, always available, you create a rhythm that becomes predictable. But when you step away, even just slightly, you break that rhythm. You introduce silence, not emptiness, but space. And in that space, she begins to wonder. She starts to notice your absence, feel it, and eventually miss it. That missing feeling is not just about communication. It's about emotional presence. It's your energy she's used to feeling, your tone she's used to hearing, your way of making her feel. Now replaced with a void. And in that void, her mind starts to reach for you. Strategic disappearance means you step back deliberately and calmly. You aren't reacting to her behavior or trying to provoke a response. Instead, you're acting from self-awareness and emotional leadership. You're creating a pause in the rhythm, and it's in that pause that deeper attraction is formed. Think of it like music. Silence is just as important as sound. In fact, silence gives meaning to the notes. When you go quiet for a moment, whether it's for a day, 2 days, or just a few hours longer than usual, it gives her the mental space to reflect, to imagine, to desire. You're giving her a chance to process what you bring into her life by briefly removing it. And often, that is when she realizes just how strong your presence really was. But this isn't about disappearing out of nowhere or making her chase you blindly. It's not about making her anxious or insecure. Strategic disappearance only works when you've already created value in her mind, when she associates your presence with something positive, exciting, grounding, or emotionally unique. When you've left behind small emotional imprints, like inside jokes, shared memories, and moments of vulnerability, then your absence isn't empty. It's filled with echoes of what she experienced when you were there. She starts to replay conversations in her head. She wonders what you're thinking. She checks her phone without realizing it. Not because she's desperate, but because the emotional link you created is still active, even in silence. The key is how you return. You don't reappear with explanations or apologies. You don't say, "Sorry, I've been busy," or "I didn't mean to ignore you." You simply re-enter the space with calm confidence, as if nothing was broken, because nothing was. You left space, and now you're back. Your energy remains consistent, your presence strong. That seamless return is what amplifies your power. It shows you weren't gone because of chaos. You were gone by choice. And that choice reflects confidence, purpose, and self-respect. She won't say it out loud, but that's what draws her deeper. It's not just about what you say or how you show up. It's about how comfortable you are not showing up for a moment and trusting that your presence still lingers even when you're not there. Absence makes the heart grow fonder only when the presence was meaningful. That's why strategic disappearance is not the first step. It's the follow-up to deep emotional anchoring and unpredictable presence. Once you've created that initial connection, stepping back allows her to experience your presence in a new way. She doesn't just think about you. She starts to feel your absence. and that feeling becomes a quiet form of emotional attachment. Not because you demanded her attention, but because your silence made her realize she misses what you bring into her life. When done right, strategic disappearance doesn't create distance. It creates depth. It doesn't weaken attraction. It strengthens desire. Because when you return, and she feels that quiet excitement building again, she knows something few men ever managed to create. You're not just someone she met. You're someone her mind keeps returning to, again and again. Now you understand why some men stay on a woman's mind and others simply fade away. It's not about looks, status, or fancy words. It's about the quiet psychological shifts you create. Emotional anchoring makes her feel something deep when you're around, something she can't fake and won't forget. Unpredictable presence keeps her mind alert, drawn to your mystery, always trying to understand what's coming next. And strategic disappearance gives her the space to realize your worth in your absence, to feel your presence even when you're nowhere near her. These three layers don't work in isolation. They build on each other. Together they form a pattern that naturally draws her in, deepens the emotional connection, and makes you unforgettable. This isn't about manipulation. It's about becoming the man who knows his value so deeply he doesn't chase, he attracts. It's about living with intention, speaking with purpose, and creating impact without ever needing to beg for attention. You are no longer operating from doubt or fear. You are leading the connection with presence, precision, and calm power. The truth is, most men will never learn this. They'll keep chasing, overthinking, over-messaging, hoping for attention. But you've now been given a completely different map, a strategy that respects both her emotions and your own strength. Use it wisely. These aren't tricks. These are truths. And when applied with honesty and care, they will transform not only how women see you, but how you see yourself.